Now, from Wish TV, your local news source, this is All Indiana Politics.
Good Sunday morning. Welcome to another edition of All Indiana Politics. I'm Phil Sanchez. A potentially controversial new name is joining the Republican primary for governor. Former Indiana Attorney General Curtis Hill says he will run for the state's highest office. The Indiana Supreme Court briefly suspended his law license in 2018 when he was accused of sexual misconduct. Our government reporter, Garrett Berquist, was one of the first reporters to interview Hill about his gubernatorial run.
Let's welcome in gubernatorial candidate and former Indiana Attorney General Curtis Hill. Welcome back to the program.
Well, thank you for having me.
So why are you running for governor?
Well, I'll tell you, this country is in a world of hurt. We're a divided nation, and I honestly believe that the best place to start the solutions is at the grassroots level, the people. And at the people level, you have to look at the states. And so I think it's time for our states to rise up. And this state needs solid leadership, conservative leadership, proven leadership that can provide the solutions to the many problems that face our country and our state. I've talked to folks all over the state, and they're hungry for a proven conservative who has a record of leadership and accomplishment. So I think it's our opportunity to give back and to provide that leadership that's so badly needed.
I want to address a couple of issues you list on your website. You say that you'll continue to crack down on violent criminals as governor. How do you do that without over-incarcerating people for lower-level offenses, such as drug possession?
Well, drug possession is not an offense that we need to be incarcerating people for the most part. There's really two types of individuals that need to be incarcerated, and that's your violent offender, your murderer, your rapist, your child molester. Those individuals who commit that type of an offense the first time really need to be looked at from a sanction standpoint. The second category of individual who needs to be incarcerated is the chronic offender, and that's the person who does it over and over and over again. And that's really what the problem is in Indiana and all over the country from a public safety standpoint. A small number of people commit the vast amount of crime in any particular community. So if you have effective policies to address that small number of individuals, you can effectively reduce crime and increase your public safety.
You also say that you'll target wasteful spending and unnecessary regulations in state government. Can you give me some specific examples of each?
Well, absolutely. When you're in the governor's office, you're in charge of all of the state agencies. And the agencies are large bureaucracies that have individuals that have been there for a number of years that do things their way and really sort of wait it out for the leadership if the leadership's not careful. What we'll do is evaluate the type of waste that occurs in the state agencies, placing and appointing individuals who will go in and look at making appropriate reductions in personnel and as well as other wasteful spending to reduce the size of government. The very first thing that we should be doing is looking at a way to improve efficiencies through reductions of staff, reductions in responsibilities, and making sure that Indiana is well served by its executive agencies.
Now, additionally, you've said that you'll target policies that allow transgender athletes to compete under their gender identity. The legislature already banned that for K through 12 schools. Why is that not enough?
Well, I think it's important that we stay on the right track in terms of the objective truth of making sure that we protect our women athletes and our women in general. The protected class status has started to conflict with various degrees of protected class, and so it's important that we identify all Hoosiers as being deserving of being treated appropriately and having great opportunity, not only in athletics, but in other endeavors as well.
You're up against three very well-funded primary opponents who already been campaigning for this office for months. How do you expect to break through that?
Well, I think that from a timing standpoint, we've talked to a lot of folks across the state, and the enthusiasm and excitement just is not there under the current circumstances. So yes, there's a lot of money that's been raised in this race, but I don't think it's a matter of pulling out a checkbook and being able to write a check. I think it relates back to the grassroots connections of the individual of wanting to understand what they want in their state, what they want in their state governor, and what they want in their government. So from our standpoint, we believe that proven executive leadership is the right mark, and that's what we offer.
How do you win over voters who remember the sexual misconduct allegations against you from your time as Attorney General? You already were passed up in the race to succeed the late Congresswoman Jackie Walorski.
Well, from day one, my popularity as a conservative candidate and a conservative office holder has made me a threat. And also my willingness to stand up against the status quo. So it's no surprise that I have faced attacks. But the easy thing to do would be to step back and say, gee, let's avoid all the controversy. That's just not the way I'm built. We have a state that's in need of conservative leadership with a record of accomplishment, and I'm ready to get back at it.
What do you believe sets you apart from the rest of the Republican primary field?
Well, experience and leadership. I have run in a race where I was the most successful vote getter in that particular race. So I had a demonstrated winning ability, but also my service as Attorney General demonstrated my conservative values, my work ethic, and our ability to run a major executive office. So I think that I've got the background and the record to demonstrate what type of leadership we'll need for a future that's very uncertain, for a future that's very challenging.
Curtis Hill, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, coming up, another new candidate for next year, this time in the Senate race. Welcome back. Another Democrat has joined next year's Senate race. Keith Potts has served on the Indianapolis City County Council since 2019. Our Garrett Berquist asked him about his decision to run.
Let's welcome in Democratic U.S. Senate candidate Keith Potts. Keith, thank you for dropping by.
Thanks for having me.
Why are you running for the Senate?
Well, you know, I'm running for the United States Senate because in the work that I've done on our Indianapolis City County Council, I've seen government work. I've seen government at its best when we're getting things done and we're delivering results for our community. And when we see some of the things happening in Washington, when we see the biggest challenges facing our country, I don't think we see Washington always doing the same. So I want to bring that same work ethic and that hard work that we do here on the Indianapolis City County Council to Washington to get things done for Indiana and for America.
In your campaign launch ad, you cast this campaign as being about more freedom versus less. What do you mean by that?
You know, freedom is it covers such a broad spectrum of what it means to be an American and what rights that we have. Is it our freedoms to vote? Is it our freedoms to make our own health care decisions? And from my perspective, when we see what Republicans in Washington are doing, they're trying to limit those freedoms. They're trying to limit the freedom of expression for folks. And so the fight that I want to bring is to expand on those freedoms so that every American and every Hoosier can live authentically and have every right that they deserve.
Jim Banks has well over $2 million on hand right now and the support of the Republican base. Democrats got less than 40% of the vote in the last Senate election back in 2022. How's next year going to be any different?
So I think there are some different circumstances that this is an open seat rather than challenging an incumbent, as well as, you know, it's going to be a presidential year, and we're going to see some really different circumstances at play, I think, over these next 16 months. That's why we're taking our message to all 92 counties, to every Hoosier, so that we can secure the nomination as early as possible and then keep our fight and focus on Jim Banks. Should there be a federal law on abortion, and if so, what should it look like? I think codifying Roe versus Wade is the direction to go, which is in terms of the life or health of the mother and in terms of fetal viability. It's the standard that we had for 50 years under Roe versus Wade, and it's the one that we ought to have moving forward. Should there be a specific time frame for when a woman could obtain an abortion for circumstances other than rape or incest or to save their life? I think the definition of fetal viability is just that. There's no specific number that can be attested to it, but the definition of fetal viability is the viability for life outside of the womb, and I think that, as the standard in Roe versus Wade, ought to be the case. You directly called out Jim Banks for wanting to cut Social Security. That program is going to run out of money in a little over 10 years. What's your plan for heading that off? Well, Social Security, we got to make sure that it's funded. This is a promise that we've made to our seniors and to future generations. I think we can raise the cap on Social Security taxes that are levied on Americans to a higher rate, index that over a course of years so that folks aren't feeling it day to day. But we definitely need to be sure that folks who are making more money are paying their fair share because hard working class folks and middle class folks deserve to have the Social Security that's been promised to them.
You voted for Mayor Joe Hogsett's gun ordinance, and that includes, among other things, ending permitless carry and a ban on any future sales of military-style rifles. Would you support something similar at the federal level?
Absolutely. Those are common sense measures that the majority of Hoosiers and the majority of Americans agree with. We even saw those measures get bipartisan support from our Republican candidate for mayor here in Indianapolis just yesterday. So we see that there is broad bipartisan support behind these measures. It's just a matter of getting the right folks into those seats in Washington to make sure those measures get enacted and taken care of.
What about all the people who already own military-style rifles?
Oh, if somebody already has a weapon that they've already purchased and they've purchased legally, that's their right as an American to have and keep it. I think the law that we need to enact, that we need to advocate for, is looking towards the future to making sure we're keeping our kids safe and keeping our communities safe.
One more question on that topic. Why focus so much on military-style rifles when day in and day out, most of the homicides in the United States that are committed with firearms are done with handguns?
Well, and oftentimes those guns find themselves in the hands of people who ought not to have them in the first place due to a certain type of criminal history or domestic violence background, and that's where we see a lot of those incidents happen. So I don't think there's just one specific type of weapon or one specific policy that we can pursue that's going to solve this problem. We are the main advanced country in this world that continues to have this problem. And absolutely, I think Americans have the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. I also think we need to make sure that we're doing everything in our power to keep people safe.
What do you believe sets you apart from the rest of the Democratic field?
So the results that I've gotten done, the things that I've delivered for my community have all been within the last few years. I bring an energy to this race, and I've been very involved within our community and our party in recent years. And you know, I'm always excited for anyone who's willing to step up and put their name on the ballot. I've done it and I'm doing it, and I respect anybody who does. But I feel confident that as our message continues going out after we're just concluding week one, as our message keeps going out there, our Democratic primary voters are going to rally around our campaign that's focused on the future.
Councilor Keith Potts, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, coming up, Indiana's best political team assesses the candidates and a controversial public safety plan from a mayor candidate. Welcome back to All Indiana Politics as we welcome in two members of Indiana's best political team, Democrat Laura Beck and Republican Allie Bartlett. Let's talk about what we heard earlier in this show, ladies. Allie, we'll start with you. Curtis Hill is just months and millions of dollars behind the three Republican frontrunners, as you very well know. He appears to be positioning himself, though, to the right of them. Does he have a realistic chance?
Listen, I think this probably would have been a different conversation several years ago. But just given the sheer difference in fundraising that we're going to see coming out of this race, I think that's going to be a huge differentiating factor. I know he mentioned in his interview that he didn't see that as the real benchmark. But when you're in a race with two people who can really easily self-fund, maybe a third, and another who's an incredible fundraiser, I mean, that really does play into things. So ultimately, I do think that's going to play a big factor.
Laura, how much of a hindrance do you think that law license suspension will be? He ultimately did not face any charges related to those sexual misconduct allegations.
Well, I think we have to look at it from two perspectives. The first is he's got to get through a primary first. And I think he's going to really try very hard to take that right-wing base and to split that right-wing base. I don't think it would have as much of an impact in a Republican primary with that right-wing base as opposed to in a general election. But for that matter, I have to say, I mean, I may be the only one here, hopefully I'm not, but I'm just kind of tired of talking about Curtis Hill. I really think that he must feel very proud and very strongly about his own abilities, and he may be one of the few people who does that. But at this point in time, I think he is. I think he's got a lot of baggage. He allegedly, or he groped 4 women, one of whom was a elected official, and his law license was suspended for 30 days. I mean, all of his dirty laundry was aired during that hearing. So the fact that he doesn't have any money is going to be really hard for him in a primary, because he won't be able to defend himself against the truth and what's out there.
Yeah. We'll see what happens there. Moving to the interview with Keith Potts right now. He's the only Democrat running for Senate who is an incumbent office holder. Laura, will stay with you here. Does that give him an advantage over the rest of the field?
I don't know if it gives an advantage, but it certainly he certainly has run in recent years, and so he is familiar with what that process is like. I think we've got good candidates on the Democrat side, and frankly, I think they pose a stark contrast to Jim Banks. I was really impressed as I was listening to what he had to say. I've been impressed by what his opponent has to say, and so I think as long as we're focusing on these kitchen table issues that really matter to Democrats, and we're staying away from the culture wars, I think we've got a lot of positive things ahead of us there.
To that point, though, Allie, Potts appears to be taking aim at Republicans on abortion and LGBTQ rights in his ads. Given Banks's positions, do you see that resonating with voters and maybe even peeling them off?
No, I really don't. I think he's taking a real big leap here from city council to U.S. Senate. He's starting to talk about this freedom platform, but then I think he's misunderstanding some of the stuff that he's talking about, because then he's pivoting straight to the Dobbs opinion and the Second Amendment, which really are his points are saying that he wants to limit people's freedoms. So I don't really understand that platform. It sounds a little mixed up in my opinion. I think people are going to be very supportive of Jim Banks and his positions, which actually support freedom. And so I don't think it's going to be much of a challenge.
I want to turn to some municipal issues now. Republican Indianapolis Mayor candidate Jefferson Shreve released his public safety plan. It includes the very gun control ordinance that the City County Council approved at Mayor Joe Hogsett's request. So, Allie, did Shreve just hand this election to Joe Hogsett?
No, I don't think so. I think there is one stark difference between the plans. I mean, there are several differences. The biggest one for me is that Jefferson Shreve's plan talks specifically about hiring a public safety director. And that is somebody who is supposed to be more than a figurehead. That is, we're past that. Like, Indianapolis has a crime problem that is past that. And I think that's a really key central part of this. When it has to do with the gun control piece, I think that the point being made by the Shreve campaign is that he feels he has a better opportunity to work with the state legislature as a Republican to come to a place where we can agree on how Marion County should address those things separate from the state law.
Laura, the plan, though, especially when it comes to the 21 and 18 age situation, very similar to Hogsett's.
Well, I mean, it isn't much of a plan, because it's pretty much what Mayor Hogsett has been doing and has been working all along. What really stuck out to me about this is when you think back, it was 1 year ago when Governor Holcomb signed the permitless carry bill into law. And if Jefferson Shreve wanted to be mayor then, which I believe he probably did, where was Jefferson Shreve standing up at the legislature, working with the very legislators he wants to work with to advocate against permitless carry? He was nowhere to be found. He had an opportunity there to stand up and to say, this is wrong. This isn't going to work for Marion County. We've got to protect our law enforcement officers. We've got to protect people in the city. We cannot have permitless carry. He did nothing. He sat back and did nothing. When he was on the City County Council from 2013 to 2016, he took money when he ran for state senate from the NRA, and he ran an ad touting his NRA bona fides. So basically, I don't think there's much teeth behind it, because I think he just came up with this because he's a politician and is going to say anything to get elected. Mayor Hogsett's been in the trenches. He's been working through this. He has gotten us through the pandemic. And I think this quote unquote plan is just not going to pass muster with voters.
Unfortunately, ladies, we are out of time. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time. Thank you. We'll be right back.
Thank you. Thanks.
Take all Indiana politics on the go with you. Download our podcast now. part of the All Indiana Podcast Network and allindianapodcastnetwork.com.
And thank you for joining us for All Indiana Politics this week. We'll be back here next Sunday morning at 9:30. You can also find our brand new All Indiana Politics podcast. It's part of the All Indiana Podcast Network over at wishtv.com. Have a great rest of your weekend.